On the 5th day of Christmas, the Armsman sent to me Jack Frost. Hello, I'm sorry about the change of scenery. I was about to get started with editing this video and realised that I'd accidentally deleted the video from my tablet and my computer and I just lost it. It just disappeared. So, who knows? Maybe we can add that to what we're going to be talking about here. So I'm having to do a very rushed video, get it out, so obviously not in my contact lenses, still in a nice shirt, so that's always good, and unfortunately I put away the Baron setup, so we're going for this. So sorry about the extra jump cuts with this one, but at least I got the video out, so that's something. So, Jack Frost. Now, when I started planning to do Jack Frost, I was thinking about this version of Jack Frost from Rise of the Guardians. And then, after that, I started looking into it further and further and found that Jack Frost originally started as this kind of character, who was a Confederate depiction of frost and winter, who slew the northern armies during the American Civil War. And then I kept looking further and further, and this is where the problem came. I've said right from the get-go with this one, I'm not going to be arming Jack Frost, because Jack Frost I cannot arm. Because Jack Frost will not be a part of my arming videos. He originally started out as going to be one of them, but unfortunately that is lost due to finding out so much about the character and the figure. So, what have I learnt? And what can I now impart on you, lovely YouTubey people, in this time of frost and winter? Well, what I can impart on you is that Jack Frost predates the first telling of Jack Frost, going back, and is actually a more modern term coined by both the British and the Americans and some Europeans like the French and the Spanish during the time of moving from Europe to America. What it was before that is it's a conglomerate name. Jack Frost is the name given to all of the different winter and frost and snow sprites and spirits and fairies and pixies and not as like gods, but the other thing, like the great spirits, I'll call them, from all cultures, not just European. And we can see that in some other tellings of Jack Frost-like beings currently still being told today. Like in Germany, they have a character called Mother Holle. Mother Holle is again a kind of character similar to Jack Frost, in which she beats her pillowcase and snow rains down on German villages. Likewise, we then have Jack Frost, who we have nowadays and back then as well, who is a figure who creates ice and frost and snow, and can be a figure that creates mischief, can be a figure that creates good and happiness, or can be a figure of horror and evil. Now, where do these interpretations come from? Because Mother Holle is a very good character, as is the version of Jack Frost from the English and the French. Well, we have the Eastern stories, Hindu Kush. That's probably a mispronunciation, but there we are. So Hindu Kush is a mountain range where at the top are massive amounts of frost and ice. And there is a story in Hindi where people would travel along there, and there was a giant that would wait in silence and stillness and quiet for the travellers to go across the mountain range, and it would jump out and kill them and eat them, and done. And when those stories were told, the English explorers at the time out there thought that Hindu Kush was the name of the monster, and then they retranslated that into Jack Frost, who was a story in England at the time. And then we go even further east, and we go further east to the earliest telling I can find of a figure like Jack Frost in Asia, in Japan, to be specific. And this kind of story, I managed to find some connection with a Chinese story, though I couldn't find the actual Chinese story. I'll try and hunt it down, because, to be honest, all those kind of ice spirit deities, demons, spirits, sprites, and figures are really interesting, because they all do interconnect and have some similarities. But this one a lot of people will know as the yokai Yuki Onna, who the earliest telling of the actual Yuki Onna story and the actual figure, the actual descriptions and all that, the earliest I could find is 1336 AD. Now that's important to remember that year, because before that there were little folk tales, before they were all kind of conglomerated into, again, Yuki Onna, who would then conglomerate again into Jack Frost. And all of these tellings of him have something in common with a story that predates even that, and that is the Russian story of Frost. I'm not going to go into massive amounts of detail on this, but basically while I was doing the research on this, the Baroness had a book out, and I was just talking to her about this, because the figure that all of these ones kind of stem from is a character called Old Man Winter, who is a very, very old world demigod, as it were, a natural spirit of ice and winter and frost. And when I mentioned that, she went, "Hold on, what did you just say?" And I went through it with her again, and she said, "That's like the story I'm just reading right now." And she gives me the book, and the book is a translation of the Afanasiev. Right, let's go with that. That's probably a butchering of the Russian name, but Afanasiev Library. And you might have heard of that, anyone who's a lover of history and folk tales, because he was effectively the Russian version of the Brothers Grimm. He collected folk stories from all across Russia and collected them in his library. And he was deemed as a rebel, as a upstart against the aristocracy, against the bourgeoisie. I love that word. I love that word. So he lost his job, and after losing his job, he collected all these stories and turned them into full-length books, so that people could hold on to their history. And then a man named Thomas P. Whitney from America went to Russia and was able to translate a good number of these stories. And one of the stories in there is a story called Frost, which is, from what I can find, one of the oldest stories of Old Man Winter. In there, the figure Old Man Winter, Old Man Frost is a very kindly figure, but will kill you as well. And that is the perfect mix of those two forms of the Jack Frost story. The mischief maker and the murderer. And those are two big parts of the Jack Frost story. Those seem to always be two things that people hold in mind with Jack Frost. He can be a figure of good, or he can be someone who is going to kill you. And then we look back even further. There's one culture, there is literally one culture that has figures that match in with all of those traits. And that culture is something we all know. It's Vikings. Now, Vikings go back way further than some people realise. Vikings are a culture that were around for well over 1,000 years, and their history spans that. And there's one part of their history very important. Ice giants. Now, we're not talking about Loki from Marvel, Tom Hiddleston kind of sexy ice giants. We're talking about real ice giants. We're talking about figures as big as mountains that ride glaciers down steeps and will destroy the world. That is the original story of the ice giants. And that is what I personally think Jack Frost is. I think that through time, as we can see with most things when it comes down to mythology, the occult, and magic, and this is actually the start of magic and occult and history videos, so I hope this goes well. It's already not, but let's go with it. Characters change through history. A villain can become a hero becomes a villain, and as well as that, mythical creatures change. And we're not just talking, and in this situation we're talking about ice giants starting as gigantic figures who ride oxen down mountains and destroy the world, eventually becoming a figure of vengeance, eventually becoming a figure of support, and finally becoming a figure of mischief. And we can look back and look at the ice giant stories and see that there were mischief makers in there. Loki being an example. Loki, in fact, being a son of an ice giant in the original Norse mythology. not just the Marvel. Turns out Stan Lee doesn't come up with all his own ideas. And that is the crux. Their magic, mischief making, it all kind of links in together. And there's one other thing about that, and something I'd just like to point out before the end of this video. I've lost a lot of information on this video. I've had to do this about 3-4 times. This part you're seeing now is actually the 6th recording. When it started, it was the 3rd recording. That's how many times things have gone wrong and things have been missed. So, that is why I put him down as a nice giant. Not just all the history and mythology, but also the loss of information. Much like we have had with elves. And I can't wait to do a video on elves. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video that I finally managed to get out. Have a very Merry Christmas, and come back and join us tomorrow for day 6 of the 12 days of Armsmas. Thank you, and get out of my house. Bye.